Eric Anthony Yamashita Ariola was a big baby. He was an unexpected baby. We had just had Ryan Jeffrey, and then we were pregnant again. And so it was like, how did this happen? And 9 months later, Eric was born on June 28th, 1992. And after a couple of hours of hard labor, he was over 8 pounds, and he entered the world. And he was a beautiful baby. Eric, in the shadows of his brother Ryan, always did whatever his brother tried to do. I think my most wonderful times are looking at those photos of him. He's actually looking over and seeing what Ryan's doing and following him. But what was different was that Eric was so much more energetic. He was zooming off the walls. He was bouncing. We have photos of him jumping on the couch with his crayons in his hands and just having the most wonderful time. He was exuberant. He was enthusiastic. He was energetic. He was fun. He was always laughing and cuddling, and we just enjoyed life. He was life, you know. And Ryan was quieter, but was there. He was the big brother, and he was helping his brother, and it was great. And then, around age 2, things just started to change. And while Eric and I have always communicated really well, our communication was always right on. He always knew when I needed something or wanted something. I always knew when he needed something or wanted something. And those connections were understood and delivered upon. But he didn't speak. He didn't speak. And so people started saying to me, aren't you a little concerned? He's not speaking. And I'd be, well, you know, his own timetable, he's an individual, just give him more time. Maybe he doesn't need to speak, maybe we're doing too much speaking. And we started thinking like that. But then I really did notice changes. He started withdrawing more and more. And he wasn't Eric. He was a different Eric. Yeah. And so we got to the point where we knew we had to talk to people, different people. PEDS, we went there, and it was horrible because the sounds. He didn't want to be in the booth. He didn't want to be around these people. And then I knew, oh, the trauma, it's kicking in, and it came really, really fast. Everything changed. From being a confident, fun little boy, we became a ghost of a child that I had known for about 2 years. Bob Younger was our pediatrician, and he just looked at me and he said, yeah, something's up. Then it was people saying, my mom, Eric's grandmother, saying, it's because you had all those immunizations at the same time. And so it was just one thing on top of another, and the guilt and the wondering, you know. But then, you know, you got to get over it because Eric needed the assistance. So you do what you got to do. You know, you suck it up, and you figure out next steps, and you do it. And so we met with Kirk Bellis, and brought him into Kirk's office. And again, it's a new place, it was just, he just kind of like withdrew into a corner. And so after a couple of sessions of watching Rick and what he was doing and how he reacted, you know, Kirk said, okay, let me review more and think more about this. I'll get back to you. Our special ed world began, and the early intervention people welcomed us to the table. And while we were speaking with Kirk, we were accessing PEDS, early intervention, Kirk, Bob, that whole realm, that whole medical world was being accessed. Back to Dr. Bellis, he reviewed everything, and then I remember I was actually training school administrators. I was at a staff development center. And somebody came in and said, Aline, there's a phone call for you. And I said, well, you know, take a message. They said, it's Dr. Bellis. And then I knew I had to take the phone call. So I excused myself from the school leaders. And it was a hallway. It was a phone on the hallway. And I said, hey, Kirk. And he goes, Aline, I go, yeah, and he goes, you know, I really think Eric is PPD. And I said, PPD? And he goes, yeah, pervasive developmental disabilities. And I said, oh my God. And you know, I had known that already, because I had known it, because I study this stuff, I teach it, I've done research on it, trained on it, you know, focused my professional life around it. But when he said, I think Eric is autistic, I think he's got PPD, it was like the world just ended. It stopped big time. And I actually dropped the phone and I fell to the floor, I remember. Because when you hear it, it's different. And when it's yours, it's different. So scary. So scary. So, so I took a deep breath and I picked up the phone and hit Kirk. It's like, Aline, I said, you know, I said, okay. And he goes, okay, when you're ready, when you're ready. And I said, okay. So I hung up, and I remember we had a consultant on island, Karanaka, a beautiful woman out of Hawaii, doing some training with us. And she heard the news and she goes, Aline, you know, it's okay, I'll find a ride. And I said, no. I said, absolutely not, no. So Karen and I went out to dinner. I remember we went down to the Hilton, and she listened, and we probably didn't talk a lot about Eric at all, but it was just getting a grip on life and what we knew life was going to look like and how to move forward, because we're smart enough to know what to do, but it was processing it. So then again, back to early intervention and peds and all of that, and when they received the diagnosis, the typical kinds of recommendations. We got to get speech therapy kicked in because he wasn't speaking. Got to get him to a social setting because I had 2 young children. Ryan was about 3, Rick was 2. So I had hired somebody to come into the house and take care of my boys while I was working at the Department of Education. And so, and that made so much sense to me, get him into a social setting immediately. So scoured the island and found at that time what I believe was the best early childhood center on the island, and that was the Guam Community College Center. And so enrolled both boys. And Ryan was placed in the preschool program because he was older, he was 3, and Rick was placed in the infant toddler center because he was younger. And it was really difficult because he had such a hard time being with all those strangers and and the strangeness and the other children and the crying. And it would just break my heart handing him over because he didn't want to be there. Mother knows. Yeah, he didn't want to be there. But I knew he had to be there. He had to be there. It was difficult for him. He was in a strange place, and I know at that point his brain wasn't able to process what was really going on. But what was wonderful were the people. I would dare myself to go back in the middle of the day or come earlier. I just had to see what was going on. And I would walk in and I would find Hermie de los Santos holding my son. I would find these different fathers, and it seems so many dads took their children to school, and they would be carrying him and singing to him. I realized I had all these guardian angels around. And then he got moved to the preschool program for the next year. And so then it was great because Ryan was there. And so Ryan and Rick were there. And certainly I chose that place because I knew that Sue and her people, Sue Hokinson and her teachers were great. They were of the highest quality. But what we also learned was there's so much to learn. Our caregivers, our teachers in early childhood are beginning to learn what it's like to teach all children, all, meaning those even with diverse issues. And so we learned a lot together. And Ryan, not knowingly or unknowingly, helped me understand what these teachers needed to learn. One day I walked in to pick up the boys, and Ryan was showing me his work on the wall. And it was great. It was beautiful work. And I said, that's really good, hon. You did really good work. And then I'm looking for Eric's. And I can't find it. So I said, Ryan, where's Eric's work? And he's like, what, Mom? Where's your brother's work? I don't see his work on the wall. And so Ryan, who was of all 4 or 5 at that time, he goes, oh, Mom, Eric doesn't do this work. And I said, what? And he goes, no, Eric gets to go sit on the carpet. He doesn't have to do this work. And I just said, what? I was furious, absolutely furious. They were actually handicapping my child. And as an early childhood person, my boys had scissors and crayons and pots and pans and water and Play-Doh and everything since they were born. So I knew Eric could trace and could cut and could color. And he did it at home all the time. So I went and I met with the teachers, and I said to them, Eric is here to be included and to be in all the activities, all of them. And he has to be expected to do all the work. And it was, but we're not sure that he can. Yes, he can. But he doesn't. Yes, he can. You need to include him. And I actually was angry, and they knew I was angry. And so, but I will say, within the next 2 weeks when I went in, I made one of those stops, there was Eric's work right up on the wall. So one of the things I have learned is people want to do what's right, but they don't always know what that is. After preschool, we went to LBJ. Ryan went to LBJ first, and so then Eric was left at GCC, and that was a very hard transition for me, separating the boys. But of course, it's a part of life, and I had to deal with that, and it was okay. And then Eric went to LBJ kindergarten, and then he had great teachers. Crystal Cable was his kindergarten teacher, and while she didn't know a lot about autism, she knew everything about children. And so she treated him like everybody else. She was gentle, she was firm, and she expected him to be with the kids. We also, at this point, entered the world of a one-to-one aid relationship aspect. And we put this aid with Eric to help him make sense of his world, but also to help everyone around him make sense of his world. So it was mutual. But I will say this, if there was a way to not have a one-to-one aid, I would recommend you don't do it. It helps protect our children, but I also really believe it enables our kids. It makes it a lot easier not to be a part of the group. It makes it a lot easier not to force them to figure out what needs to happen and then just to do it. It's very scary though, because you don't know who is really going to take care of your kids. And to put our children out there and to not know that they're protected is terrifying, because they're our kids. They're our kids. So to have Jeannie and Norma and Mike and John, those are our aides throughout the years, they gave me a peace of mind. I knew I needed to let go. I knew I needed to let Eric go and be a part of another setting to help him address his disability, to help him understand that disability, to help him learn how to cope, and to overcome parts of it. I knew I had to let go, and I did. When we went from LBJ, then to Tamuning, and then to Rias Middle, that, again, was another major transition in that they actually told me at an IEP, you need to stop coming to campus. Because I would pop in, and understanding that throughout this time, I was a central office administrator, I was the associate for curriculum and instruction, and then I was a deputy director for the Department of Education. And so I was at their campuses all the time. And so the IEP folks said to me, you need to stop popping in, because everybody was suffocating because they never knew when I was coming or when I wasn't coming, and they were very scared of me. And I understand that. I understand that whole notion of intimidation, of me being, having incredibly high expectations. But I understood the rest of the system, wanting to do what was right, but not wanting to be under the gun all the time. So I understood that. But more importantly, I knew that Eric needed to be given the space to grow up and to breathe on his own. And that meant me not being a part of everything that he was a part of. So while I am a preacher of family involvement, I totally understand that family involvement is complex in itself. Family members need to know when to step out. They need to know when to give the space. Family members need to know when to let our kids fall down and then learn how to get back up. Family members need to know when to give a safety net rather than holding them with our own arms. And so I've learned that. I've learned that. And so starting in middle school, I stopped stopping it. And I started trusting a lot more. And the middle school folks that we worked with at Jose Rios Middle were the best. And they were wonderful. Great administrators, great teachers, teams of teachers. To this day, still call me or email me asking how Eric is doing. When we were at GCC, Eric was the only identified special needs child in that setting. And so he had a room full of other children who were quote-unquote typical or quote-unquote normal. And so I, at that point, made a promise to myself and a promise to Eric that he will always be included. He would always be in an inclusive setting. So from preschool all the way until grade 12, Eric has always been in a general education setting. He has never set foot into a resource room. And it has been difficult because I've had many people say to me, he belongs in the resource room. And I would say, no, he doesn't. He belongs in the general setting classroom. So yes, Eric has been in the general ed classroom from the very beginning until today. And I really highly recommend that anybody with a special needs child, you insist. I think Eric's being a part of the general ed classroom has really helped him grow in a lot of different ways. It certainly, I think, has provided him opportunities that I don't necessarily think he would have gotten if he was in a resource room. For example, to Toomening Elementary, they said, hey, Eric, you want to be a part of the artathon? And I don't know if he really understood that, but I do know that he knew that he was going to create something. And so he developed, or he created a beautiful picture of a whale. And that was actually picked, and it hung at Isla Center for the Arts. In middle school, we had two peers, Christine and Kenny, who were his peer coaches, his peers, and they were always next to him. And, you know, I talked to them off to the side. I'm like, you know, is he doing all right? And then I go, yeah, miss, we're doing fine. Eric is just fine, miss. And then it was time to graduate, and Christine went to GW and went to JFK, and she was like, oh, man, I'm going to miss him. And I said, oh, Christine, I'm going to miss you, because she was just always by his side, just making sure that, yeah, he's here, you know, and if he needed help, she helped him, you know. And I would always tell these kids, you guys are going to be teachers. I just so know that. You're going to grow up to be teachers, you know. And that was wonderful to see the diversity issues. Our children are great at that. It's the adults. It's the adults who need to sit back and think about people, because these are all of God's children, and they're given to us for a reason. And I've had to reconcile that in my head many, many times, you know. And so it's the kids who are great with it, the kids who are like, oh, yeah, I know Eric, yeah, he's in my class, you know. Or when he is having a meltdown, they don't fight him, they don't beat him up. They give him the space, right, and they get it. Transitioning to high school was very difficult because secondary teachers have a hard time accepting these children, mostly because they're not prepared for it and they're scared, I think. And so at the transition meeting at JFK that summer, it was very sloppy work. The system wasn't doing a good job, and I forced the issue. School was starting. I wanted to know who his 9th grade teachers were. So they said, well, if you come, you can meet some of these teachers. So I did, and I spoke to them, and I said, you know, I just really believe that it's a part of your job to teach all kids. And I think that all the other kids can gain from Eric being in their classroom as well. And I would ask that you give it a shot. And I'll do whatever I can to get you the resources that you need. And I had to make that pitch every single year, because every single year we had to convince teachers that we could be with them. And so everyone's thinking about it. But Karen Howe came up to me and she says, Aline, I would be more than happy to have your son in my class. And I said, oh, Karen, thank you, but you teach seniors. And she said, that doesn't matter. I would be more than happy to have Eric in my class. Eric never had a meltdown in her class. Eric was with all the football players. They became his guardian angels. They were like, hey, Rick, what's up? I mean, out of the stories I got, he did all the work that those seniors did. He created ornaments that hung in Washington, D.C. on the trees. I have pencil holders at my workstation right now that he made. During parent-teacher conference or during phone calls, she'd say, he is doing all the work that everybody else is doing and even better. And so it was her acceptance, it was her expectation, and then it was her support. It was her attitude, it was her manner, God bless her, because she has moved on. But she for me was, yes, this can be done. And when she told me what the others have learned from Eric about patience, about diversity, about doing it a different way, about helping, I was just like, Karen, you're so right. Thank you. Eric is supposed to be graduating this year from John F. Kennedy High School. But because the transition program, the transition processes have fallen apart, he is not graduating this year. And that has been, I think, the most difficult thing that our family has dealt with, because they've seen him grow, they've seen him learn, and they don't understand why he's not graduating. Having everyone understand he's not ready to go into an adult world. He's not ready to be without the supports and services that being a part of the Guam public school system avails us to if we're a part of them. But yet, I feel that they're not focused on our children after high school. And we have had many, or at least one expert, Ed O'Leary, come out and talk to us about how we need to start this transition planning in middle school. And I am such a believer of that. It takes that long to prepare our children for after high school. And so I also am more and more an advocate. I mean, first of all, as I said, I'm an early childhood educator, there's no doubt. But now I go around saying that our children do not die after age 8. So that means the transition into elementary, middle, and high school and adulthood needs to occur, because it's not. We do great work on the silent early childhood. We need to do better, but we do great work already. But we have to go beyond, we have to look beyond. So the transition planning for Eric hasn't happened. It's happening now, but it's not going to be done by June, which is when he should be walking down the hall. Has he completed his graduation requirement credits? Absolutely. We have all the English, math, science, social studies, art that we need, but we're not ready to go into the community. And I know that any person, with or without a child with disabilities, any parent is really concerned about what happens to their kid, how they're going to make a living, where they're going to live, what kind of friends are they going to have, what kind of parties are they going to go to, where are they going to shop, who are they going to hang out with. And that just hurts your heart when if I die tonight, I don't know where Eric's going to be tomorrow. We don't have a living place for our children. And he should not be in an institution. He should be in an integrated living community where he has his own place, where there's other people living there who will watch and help him. Should be a barbecue place. He's a great cook where he can barbecue. He loves to barbecue. There should be a swimming pool there where he swims. He washes his own clothes. There should be a place where he does a laundromat where he does that. But there should be a place for these children. We have over 100 of our kids right now who are identified autistic. What's going to happen to them when I hope I die before he dies? What's going to happen to them? The last 2 years, Hank Schilling, who is our transition coordinator, has been working really well with this. We've identified what Eric likes to do. And we've gone out in the community and we've asked businesses, government agencies to open up their doors to us. And you know, they have. And that has been remarkable in that we have found through that process that Eric loves the land. He just loves the land. We started at the Agania Pool, Recreations and Parks. Joe Duenas has been absolutely marvelous and has welcomed us. And there we have planted eggplant and pepper, and he's harvested his fruit, and he's shared it with the aides and the teachers. He has learned how to test the water in the pool to see if it's clean enough or not clean enough. They have data from the beaches around the island, the pollution levels. He's created a database for it, and he's inputted all that data. One of his transition work experience sites have been at the Paseo. Hank has us working with Joe Mendiola at Parks and Rec at Paseo, and Eric has been involved in the Heritage Trail service project, and he has developed a part of the Heritage Trail at the Paseo. So last week Thursday there was a ribbon cutting ceremony for the Heritage Trail, which takes us through, I think, 15 stops from Fort Apugan down to the Paseo, historical spots throughout Agana. And at the ribbon cutting, I didn't go because family members, if they're present outside of the home with Eric, it throws him off. He gets very confused. So we do everything that we can to give him that space and respect that. But I have gotten pictures of him, and I'm just so proud because the stories have come through that they honored him. They acknowledged his work. They said his name, and he said, "That's me." And when they asked him to stand up, he goes, "Stand up," and he smiled. And the picture-taking part, he smiled broadly with everybody, the governor and his aides. And when I see that picture, I have that posted next to my workstation. I know that he's fine without me. And I know that with his supports, he can succeed. He can do something of worth. I know we still have work to get him to a place where he can earn a paycheck and where he will be fine in that regard. We want to know that our kids are going to be fine without us. I mean, that's our dream. If we're not there, are they okay? Can they make decisions? Can they live? Are they going to be fine? And to see that smile on his face, of him having his picture taken with others, he's going to be fine. We still got steps, but I'm very proud of him, of reaching this moment. In looking back, everybody has been really nice, but there has been such a void of knowledge. And I'm thinking maybe today we know that every 1 out of 110 people are autistic. We understand that. But maybe 18 years ago, we were a rarer statistic. And so when I think back about how nice everybody was, I wish they had known what we know today, because there's so many things that should have happened that really didn't happen. There's some things that happened that greatly helped us, for sure, but I think there's some things, if we had it in place, we would be even further ahead. But we are where we are, and we're doing, I think, what we can. These are God's children. All kids count. All children count. It's hard work. It's hard work, and it's continuous work. You go from one to another, from one objective to another. Support each other. Support each other. You got a plan, work with each other. Always remember it's about kids. It's about the kids. It's not about the laws. It's not about the rules. It's not about the money. It's not about the regulations. It's about the kids, and it's about their hearts, and it's about their brains. And furthermore, it's about their families. I think teachers, service providers need to do a better job at working with families. We are your partner. We are there to help you. And do we get angry? You better believe it. But we also can be happy. Can we challenge you? It's our job to do that sometimes. So don't take it personally. Figure out what the job is to help every kid realize their potential, and we'll be there right with you. More and more and more families are insisting our children are in all classrooms. And even if they are in a resource room, they're still in the cafeteria, they're still in the hallway, they're still walking through a parking lot. So there are kids. And I also suggest that we all, as a community, know that diversity issues are everywhere. We live with each other. We're in the same stores, we're in the same malls, we're in the same churches, and every single area that I've identified has great room for progress. And so I ask that we all figure out how can we live respectfully with each other. And then if you still don't get it, can you just pretend that that's your kid? Pretend that that's your child, because that makes a difference. Living it, it's just different. It's so different.